So today I wanted to show you how to make chocolate mousse, which is another great thing to show how I wanted to show how you can whip egg whites in the Thermomix, because there's a few hints and tips, but this is a great recipe to try as well. So I'm just going to press start cooking. We're following the recipe on Cookie Do, but it's also in your basic cookbook. So the first thing it asks me for is some sugar, and I am using raw sugar. It's asking me to put in 50 grams. So anytime you are milling a dry ingredient, you do need to make sure your bowl is very dry. If it has a little bit of moisture in there, it's not going to mill very well. So that's one tip about milling. So I've put in the sugar, it's telling me to put the lid on, done. And then we go up to speed 10 for 10 seconds. So that's 10 seconds for this recipe, and that's how much you mill sugar for sorbet and certain things. But if you wanted like super fine icing sugar for making icing, like buttercream icing, you do need to mill it for about a minute. But you can see there we've got nicely milled icing sugar there, and that's perfect for this recipe. So now we're adding some dark chocolate, 200 grams, and that just goes in. And I'm just going to make sure that sugar is down. It's looking good. And it's asking us, if you wanted to speed up the process of melting the chocolate, you could put the lid on now and grate that chocolate. But I'm just going to follow the recipe for today. I'm not in a hurry, so that's fine. I'm adding in 100 grams of whipping cream. Looking good. And I went a little bit over, but that's okay. I'm not going to worry about it. And this time we are melting that for 4 minutes on 50 degrees, speed 2. And I'll pause the recording. So that is done. The next step, and just check, always check that it is melted. It's looking very nice. I can tell that it's all melted in there. So the next step is to add the egg yolks. So that's 4 egg yolks going in. We're going to mix that together just for 15 seconds on speed 4. I don't say much where that's going. I don't know if you can hear me. So now it is telling me to transfer the mixture into a bowl and set aside. If you have 2 Thermomix bowls, you don't need to worry about doing that. I'll just show you. The mixture is looking great. If you have 2 bowls, you can just set this bowl aside. We'll use that later. But if you don't have 2 Thermomix bowls, set that aside, like scrape it all out, and then you need to really clean and dry your bowl for whipping the egg whites. So whenever you're doing egg whites, you need a very clean, dry, sparkling bowl. Let me get this on and I'll talk about that in a second. So yeah, it says thoroughly clean and dry the mixing bowl, because egg whites is just one of those things where you really have to make sure it's super clean and dry. Same as your butterfly whisk, make sure that's very clean and dry. Pop that on. For those who don't know, the butterfly whisk just sits on top of the blades, and if you give it a little twist, it stays in place. And so now we're getting in our egg whites. I have had these at room temp probably only for about an hour. If I was organized, I would have done it earlier in the day. One of the tips around whipping egg whites successfully is to have them at room temp. It's fine if you haven't done that, that's okay. I'll need a pinch of salt. Didn't have that out. So pop that in. I just use Himalayan salt that I actually mill up in the Thermomix for 10 seconds to make it really fine, because I buy the rocks. So you can mill lots of things in your Thermomix, spices and sugar and salt and all those things. So I'm putting the lid on, and we're going to whip these egg whites for 3 minutes. So just about egg whites, you really do need to make sure your bowl is very clean and dry. If you're worried about it, you can do what we call a vinegar wash. And that's by putting in water enough to cover the blades and a really good splash of white vinegar. I don't know the grams, but like, you'll know, maybe a quarter cup or however much. And cook that. So you could set the kettle mode or just turn it up maybe 5 minutes, 100 degrees on whatever speed, just speed 1 is fine. And then at the end, once it is very hot, once it reaches 100 degrees, turn up the dial so that that hot water is then going to be whooshing around the whole bowl, so on speed 10. Another option could be to use the pre-clean mode on your Thermomix. So if you come here, you can find that here, but you can't do it while it's going, obviously, but the pre-clean mode is right there. And you would just set it to universal. And so you've got your water and your vinegar in, and then the machine does a wash cycle where it starts at a low speed and then builds up as the temperature gets where it needs to be. So that's another good option. Yeah, and just making sure there are no egg yolks or shells or anything in the whites. It just needs to be purely the whites. Yeah, so room temp if possible, super clean and dry bowl, and your egg whites should whip up beautifully. There's a really great recipe, or there's actually a lot, really great recipes for pavlova and meringues that are in Cookie Dough that always work beautifully, and we'll see how the chocolate mousse goes today. I'll just pause while this is still whipping. Just got 1 more minute. Just show you what's happening in here, because for this recipe, the egg whites is all we need to do, but it's cooking really great. We can see that. For the pavlova and meringue recipes, the next step would be to add sugar gradually in so that it can beat. So to do that, you've got your measure cup up here. Just take that off and be putting in the sugar in the hole at the top. Just spoonful, break, spoonful, break. That's how slow you need to do the adding of the sugar if it's for a pavlova or a meringue. And I've never had a fail. It always works brilliantly. And this was only 4 egg whites. You can see what we've got here is really great. So you can imagine if you're doing an 8 egg white pavlova, this whole bowl is full, and it's awesome. So the next step it's asking us to do is to remove the butterfly whisk. So to remove that, you kind of just jiggle it around. Don't want to waste any of that white. Very firm, it doesn't want to come off. Okay. And then we are going to add the egg whites to our reserved chocolate mixture and then carefully fold in using the spatula. It's so chocolatey. This looks really good. So I am just going to add in those egg whites. Very handy that I had 2 bowls. Every now and then there are different promotions that come up to be able to get a second bowl for hosting a cooking experience. So definitely keep in touch with your consultant so you can learn when those promotions are happening. But yeah, obviously if you don't have a second bowl, that's okay. Everything will work. You'll be able to do everything. But it's just really handy for those times where you need to stop in the middle of a recipe, set something aside and get another bowl. Another one, we did sticky date pudding yesterday, and it was, pour the date mixture into another bowl, clean and dry the bowl so you can do the cake mixture. And it was like, oh, it's okay, I've got another Thermomix bowl, really easy. So to fold it, just really gently with your spatula. We're not going to turn it back on the Thermomix to do this part because it does need to be folded very gently. Even though you probably could have the butterfly in place and do it on a really low speed, but I think, you know, sometimes some things do need to be done by hand, and folding egg whites into this chocolate mixture is just one of those things. So there we go. That looks good. And then I believe that's the last step aside from setting it in the fridge. And it says to pour into serving bowls and set for 3 hours prior to serving. So I've got these cute little dessert bowls that I'm going to use. And I will I'll come back at the end of the 3 hours and show you the end result. But so far, that's what we have. There's a few little whites still there. No, that looks pretty good. So I'll be putting those in the fridge and I'll come back and show you the end. Here is the end result of the chocolate mousse. Looks good. It's perfect.